First contact under fire. The research vessel Harmony drifted through the edges of mapped space, its crystalline hull refracting starlight in mesmerizing patterns. Chief xenobiologist Vera adjusted her environmental controls, her translucent appendages rippling with excitement as she studied the strange readings on her display. The Zalaxians had spent centuries cataloging life forms throughout the galaxy, but these readings defied everything they knew about viable biological systems. "Captain Zirus," she called out, her melodic voice carrying across the bridge. "I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from Sector 7. They appear to be weapons fire, but the patterns are impossible." The ship's captain, a towering being whose crystalline form sparkled with internal light, moved to her station. "Impossible how, Chief Vera? The weapons are crude by our standards, chemical propellants, and kinetic impacts, but they're being fired in an environment that should render such primitive technology useless. The local radiation levels alone should have fried any basic targeting systems." Before Captain Zirus could respond, the ship's sensors blared an alert. Through the main viewport, space itself seemed to tear open as a massive vessel burst into existence. Its hull was scared and pitted, covered in what appeared to be makeshift armor plating. Behind it, 3 sleek pirate ships emerged from hyperspace, their weapon systems already charging. By the first light, Vera whispered, her sensors struggling to process the data. The large vessel, it's maintaining structural integrity in conditions that should be tearing it apart, and the life signs aboard. The bridge crew watched in stunned silence as the bulky ship executed a maneuver that should have been impossible for something of its size. It rolled, presenting its heavily armored spine to the incoming fire, while what appeared to be modified mining equipment along its flanks began to power up. "Incoming transmission," announced the communications officer, their bioluminescent patterns flashing with surprise. "It's audio only, using primitive radio waves." "Put it through," ordered Captain Zirus. A voice filled the bridge, its tone somehow both casual and commanding. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the independent mining vessel Stone Crusher. We've got 3 pirate ships trying to run us down, and we're about to do something that might get a bit messy. Friendly advice: you might want to back up a few thousand kilometers." Vera's instruments were registering impossible readings from the human ship. "Captain, their life support systems. They're operating in conditions that would kill most known species. The artificial gravity alone is nearly twice galactic standard, and their atmosphere contains highly corrosive elements." Before anyone could respond, the Stone Crusher demonstrated exactly why backing up had been good advice. What appeared to be industrial mining lasers, modified far beyond their intended specifications, lashed out at the nearest pirate vessel. The energy output was crude but devastatingly effective, carving through the pirate ship's more sophisticated shields as if they weren't there. "Fascinating," Vera couldn't help but comment. "They've adapted industrial equipment into weapons. The power requirements alone should be." Her analysis was cut short as the pirates launched a coordinated attack. Energy weapons designed to disable shields and sophisticated defense systems splashed harmlessly against the Stone Crusher's crude but effective armor. The human vessel's response was equally surprising. It began venting what Vera's sensors identified as superheated plasma from its damaged sections, using the hazardous material as an impromptu defensive screen. "They're deliberately releasing plasma." The science officer's appendages writhed in disbelief. The temperature levels in their damaged sections should have cooked any organic life forms alive. "Second transmission incoming," announced communications. "Hey there, science vessel." Captain Chen's voice carried a hint of strain now, but remained remarkably steady. "Look, I know this probably isn't your thing, but we could use some help. These pirates have been hitting isolated ships in this sector for months. They're not just after cargo, they're taking crew members. We've got people to protect." Captain Zirus vibrated thoughtfully, creating a sound like wind through crystal. "Your ship appears to be holding its own admirably. What assistance could we possibly provide?" A chuckle came through the speakers. "Your sensors are probably better than ours. We're running on backup systems after that last hit. We need tracking data on their vector when they jump out. They always run when their fancy shields prove useless, and I'd bet my last oxygen filter they've got a base nearby. We mean to find it." The determination in the human's voice sent ripples of unease through the Xylaxian crew. These beings were willing to pursue pirates into unknown territory, despite already operating in conditions that most species would consider lethal. The next few moments proved Captain Chen's prediction accurate. After another failed attempt to breach the Stonecrusher's defenses, the pirate vessels began powering up their jump drives. The science vessel's sophisticated sensors easily tracked their exit vector, leading toward a nearby nebula notorious for its highly caustic environment. "They're heading into the caustic veil," Vera reported. "No ship has ever successfully mapped that region. The ambient conditions would dissolve standard hull plating within hours." Another chuckle came through the comm system. "Perfect. That means they won't expect anyone to follow them. Transmitting first contact protocols now. Might as well do this properly. Captain Xeris, how would you feel about a joint rescue operation? We've got the durability to go in there, and you've got the sensors to find what we're looking for." Captain Xeris studied the readings from the human vessel once more. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards, but their biology and adaptations were unlike anything the Xylaxians had encountered. Perhaps most intriguingly, despite their obvious martial capabilities, these humans were proposing cooperation rather than conquest. "An interesting proposition," Xeris replied. "Though I must ask, how can your species function in such extreme conditions? Our readings suggest your ship's internal environment would be lethal to most known life forms." "Oh, that's just how we're built," Sarah responded with what seemed to be genuine amusement. "Earth, that's our homeworld. It's what you folks would probably call a death world. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, corrosive atmosphere, the works. Makes us pretty handy in situations like this." Vera's scientific curiosity overcame her initial fear. "You evolved in such conditions. Voluntarily maintain them on your vessels. Fascinating. Captain, the research potential alone." "Very well," Xeris decided. "We accept your proposal, Captain Chen, though we will need to establish careful protocols for any direct interaction between our crews." "Understood," Sarah replied. "Fair warning, though. We humans can be full of surprises. Now let's figure out how to track down those pirates. I don't like leaving anyone in their hands, especially not when they don't understand what they're dealing with." As the Harmony moved alongside the battered but unbowed Stonecrusher, Vera couldn't help but wonder what other surprises these Death World humans had in store. One thing was certain: the galaxy had just become a much more interesting place. The Reluctant Alliance. The meeting chamber aboard the Harmony wasn't designed for humans. Captain Sarah Chen sat in a chair meant for a much larger species, her environment suit's servos whirring quietly as she shifted position. The Xylaxians had insisted on protective protocols, though Sarah couldn't help but find it amusing that they were more worried about her safety than their own. "Your internal temperature is concerning," Vera noted, her translucent form rippling with both worry and fascination as she studied her instruments. "It's far higher than any known sentient species should be able to maintain." Sarah smiled behind her helmet's faceplate. "That's normal for us. Actually, I'm quite comfortable. This gravity feels a bit light, though." Captain Xeris's crystalline form caught the light as they turned to face the human. "Light? Our artificial gravity is set to standard galactic norm, which is about half of what we're used to," Sarah explained. "Earth's gravity is roughly twice your standard. Most of our ships maintain similar conditions, helps prevent muscle atrophy during long deployments." The assembled alien crew exchanged looks that Sarah was learning to interpret as concern mixed with disbelief. She decided to press on with the mission planning. "My engineers have adapted our sensors to interface with your systems. We've identified 3 potential locations in the caustic veil where the pirates might be hiding." A holographic display activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of the nebula. Vera moved closer, her appendages waving in agitation. The conditions in there, even with your remarkable biology, survival seems impossible. The ambient radiation alone is actually less than what our mining crews deal with in the asteroid belts back home. Sarah interrupted gently. We've got good shielding, and our bodies are pretty resilient to radiation. What concerns me more is the possibility of rescue. Rescue? Captain Zirus asked, their crystalline structure producing harmonics of curiosity. Yes, if the pirates have been taking crew members from various ships, they might not understand human biological requirements. They could be keeping their prisoners in conditions that are too gentle. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, one of the Zalaxian officers found their voice. Too gentle. Sarah pulled up the environmental data they'd gathered. Look, most species they encounter probably need carefully controlled conditions to survive. But humans, we evolved as persistence predators on a world that tried to kill us every day. We can survive in environments that would be lethal to most species, but we struggle in environments designed for more delicate life forms. She continued, pointing to specific readings. If they got my people in standard containment cells, the atmospheric pressure will be too low. The gravity might be insufficient to prevent muscle degradation. And if they're trying to be humane by keeping them in cool, low-radiation environments. She shook her head. Well, let's just say we need to find them quickly. The meeting continued as they planned their approach. The Zalaxians were brilliant scientists and navigators, their sophisticated sensors and analytical capabilities complementing the humans' durability and practical experience. But cultural misunderstandings continued to create interesting moments. During a break in the planning, Sarah removed her helmet to drink from a water container she'd brought. Several Zalaxians moved back in alarm. You're exposing yourself to the ship's atmosphere, Vera exclaimed, her instruments frantically analyzing the situation. Sarah paused mid-sip. It's fine. We checked the atmospheric composition earlier. Nothing in here that would hurt us. Though I have to say, the lack of nitrogen is interesting. But the potential for contamination. Vera's form rippled with concern. Oh, don't worry about that. Sarah grinned, then immediately regretted it when she remembered how her exposed teeth tended to unnerve the aliens. Our immune systems are pretty robust. Had to be, given Earth's biodiversity. She took another sip, then added, though I should warn you, we do release carbon dioxide when we breathe. It's not enough to affect your ship's atmosphere, but you might want to adjust your sensors to account for it. Otherwise, they might keep triggering contamination alerts. The planning session was interrupted again when Sarah's second-in-command, Maya Rodriguez, contacted them from the Stone Crusher. Captain, we've finished the repairs to the hull breach in Section 4. Had to get a bit creative with the welding, given the radiation interference, but it'll hold. Creative how? Sarah asked, recognizing the tone in Maya's voice. Well, we might have repurposed some of the mining laser focusing crystals. Turns out they make decent heat shields when you layer them right. The Zalaxians watched in fascination as Sarah and Maya discussed the improvised repairs. To them, the idea of manually repairing a hull breach while exposed to space, using repurposed industrial equipment, seemed like a story from ancient mythology rather than a routine operation. As the meeting drew to a close, Captain Zirus addressed Sarah with what she was learning to recognize as their version of respectful concern. Your species' capabilities are remarkable, Captain Chen. But I must ask, why do you choose to help others, given your obvious advantages? Many species with such abilities might choose to dominate rather than cooperate. Sarah considered the question carefully, because we remember what it was like to be vulnerable. Earth's history is full of stronger groups dominating weaker ones, and it never led anywhere good. We learned that lesson the hard way. Now that we're out here among the stars, we'd rather use our strength to protect than to conquer. She stood up, her environment suit wearing as it compensated for the light gravity. Besides, diversity makes us all stronger. Your people can survive in conditions that would crystallize our blood. You can process and analyze data in ways our brains can't match. Working together, we can do more than either of us could alone." As they finalized their plans to enter the caustic veil, Sarah couldn't help but notice how the Zalaxians' initial fear had begun to shift toward curiosity and even cautious appreciation. They were beginning to understand that humanity's Deathworld traits weren't just about survival. They were tools that could be used to protect and preserve life in all its forms. "One last thing," Sarah added as they prepared to return to their respective ships. "You might want to adjust your sensors again. We're going to be brewing coffee aboard the Stone Crusher, and last time, your systems mistook it for a chemical weapon." The sound of crystalline beings trying to process the concept of humans voluntarily consuming a beverage that registered as toxic would stay with Sarah for a long time. The caustic veil lived up to its name. Streams of ionized particles in vibrant purples and sickly greens twisted through space, creating an ever-shifting maze of lethal radiation and corrosive gases. The Harmony's sophisticated shields hummed as they deflected the worst of the nebula's fury. Behind it, the Stone Crusher pushed forward with what appeared to be stubborn indifference to the hostile environment. "Amazing," Vera murmured, watching the human ship's hull actually absorb some of the caustic elements. "They're using the nebula's corruption to reinforce their armor plating. It's completely counterintuitive, but effective," Captain Zirus finished. "Much like the humans themselves." The comm system crackled with interference as Sarah's voice came through. "We're picking up traces of recent ship activity. The pirates definitely came through here. They're leaving a trail of neutralized particles where their shields pushed through the nebula." "Confirmed," Vera reported, her sensors processing the data. "Though I'm more intrigued by how your vessel is performing. The acid content alone should be degrading your outer hull, yet you appear to be using it." Sarah's voice carried a hint of amusement. "Yeah, our hull's designed to form a protective patina when exposed to corrosive elements. Makes maintenance easier in the long run. Speaking of which, how are your shields holding up?" The question was well-timed. The Harmony's protective fields were already showing strain from the constant bombardment of hostile particles. Captain Zirus's crystalline form vibrated with concern as they studied the readings. "Our shields are operating at 60% capacity and declining," they admitted. "We had not anticipated such sustained exposure to these conditions." "Right," Sarah responded. "Maya, bring us about. We'll take point and clear a path. Our hull can handle it better than their shields." The Stone Crusher moved ahead of the Harmony, its bulky form acting as a physical barrier against the nebula's fury. The Zalaxians watched in fascination as the human ship's crude but effective design proved perfectly suited to their current situation. "Navigation is becoming problematic," Vera reported, her appendages moving rapidly across her control surfaces. "The nebula's interference is affecting our sensor resolution." "Switch to visual tracking," Sarah suggested. "We've got floodlights that can cut through this soup. Old tech, but sometimes the simple solutions work best." As if to emphasize her point, powerful beams of light burst from the Stone Crusher, cutting through the colored haze of the nebula. The Harmony's crew adjusted their sensors accordingly, relying on the human ship's illumination to supplement their more sophisticated but struggling systems. They pressed deeper into the veil, following the pirates' trail. The environment grew increasingly hostile, with pockets of space where matter itself seemed to break down under the nebula's assault. The Harmony's crew watched in amazement as their human allies treated these lethal conditions as mere inconveniences. "Contact." Maya's voice cut through the comm static. "Multiple signatures ahead. Looks like some kind of station. It's hard to get a clear reading through all this interference." The floodlights revealed a sprawling structure half hidden within a particularly dense cloud of caustic gases. It appeared to be cobbled together from the hulls of dozens of different ships, creating a maze-like complex that defied conventional design logic. "Clever," Sarah commented. "They're using the nebula itself as camouflage. Any other ship that got this close would be falling apart by now." Vera's sensors were struggling to maintain focus on the station, but they managed to detect something crucial. Captain Chen, we're picking up multiple life signs. Various species held in what appear to be segregated containment areas. And yes, there's a section where the environmental readings are significantly higher than the others. That's where they're keeping our people, Sarah confirmed, probably wondering why their prisoners aren't getting subdued by the harsh conditions. Status of your shields, Captain Zirus. 38% and falling. The crystalline captain replied. We cannot maintain our position here indefinitely. You won't have to, Sarah assured them. We've got a plan for this. Maya signaled the crew. Time to show these pirates why taking humans hostage was a really bad idea. The next few moments demonstrated exactly why humanity's reputation was beginning to spread through the galaxy. The Stonecrusher's modified mining equipment, already proven effective in combat, began a precisely calculated assault on the pirate station. But instead of attempting to breach the station's defenses directly, they targeted specific structural points that utilized the nebula's corrosive nature to their advantage. Fascinating approach, Vera observed, her scientific curiosity overriding her anxiety. They're creating controlled reactions with the caustic elements, using the station's own environment against it. That's what humans do best, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. We adapt. We take what's trying to kill us and figure out how to make it work for us instead. And right now, this lovely toxic nebula is going to help us save our people. The pirate station's defenders seemed unprepared for an enemy that could not only survive in the caustic veil, but actually use its lethal properties as a weapon. As alarms began blaring across the station and its inhabitants scrambled to respond, Sarah's voice came through the comm once more. Captain Zirus, we're about to make things really interesting. Your sensors and shields are better than anything these pirates have. Think you can provide targeting data for about 5 more minutes. The crystalline captain's form sparkled with decision. We can maintain position for that long, yes. Though I'm curious what you consider interesting given the current circumstances. Sarah's response was interrupted by Maya's excited voice. Captain, the nebula's density is creating exactly the reaction we hoped for. Ready to initiate Prometheus protocol on your mark. Prometheus? Vera asked, her translator struggling with the reference. Ancient Earth myth, Sarah explained, about bringing fire to humanity. Seems fitting, since we're about to light up this section of space. Captain Zirus, you might want to increase power to your forward shields. Things are about to get very bright. The rescue operation. The Prometheus protocol lived up to its mythological namesake. The Stonecrusher's modified mining equipment, combined with carefully calculated reactions from the nebula's caustic elements, created a cascade of energy that lit up the surrounding space like a newborn star. The pirate station's shields, designed to repel conventional attacks, provided little protection against this creative application of natural forces. By the first light, Vera whispered, her sensors barely able to process the readings. They'd weaponized the nebula itself. Target data holding steady, one of the Harmony's officers reported. The station's outer defenses are failing systematically. Sarah's voice came through the comm, calm despite the chaos unfolding around them. Converting local conditions into tactical advantages. It's a human specialty. Maya, prepare the boarding teams. Captain Zirus, we could use your sensors to guide us through their internal security systems. The crystalline captain's form sparkled with decision. Agreed, though I must note that your proposed boarding action seems inadvisable given the current environmental conditions. A chuckle came through the comm. Actually, the conditions are perfect. The nebula's interference will mask our approach, and their life support systems are already struggling to compensate for the damage we've caused. They'll never expect anyone to attempt boarding in these conditions. The Stonecrusher launched what appeared to be modified mining pods, each one carrying a small team of humans in heavy environmental suits. The pirates' remaining defenses focused on the larger ships, completely missing the small craft until it was too late. Boarding successful, Maya reported. Teams are reporting minimal resistance. The pirates seem more concerned with maintaining their life support systems than defending against boarders. They really didn't expect anyone to be able to function in these conditions. Through the Harmony sensors, the Xylaxian crew watched in amazement as the human boarding teams moved through the station with practiced efficiency. Their environmental suits, built to withstand the extreme conditions of asteroid mining, made them virtually immune to the station's deteriorating atmosphere. Found them. The call came from one of the boarding teams. Multiple holding cells, different environmental settings for different species. Our people are in the high-pressure section, just like we thought. They're alive. Looks like the pirates couldn't figure out why standard containment protocols weren't working. Sarah's voice carried a note of satisfaction. Any other prisoners? Affirmative. Various species, all in pretty rough shape. The pirates weren't exactly concerned with proper environmental controls. Permission to begin full evacuation. Granted. Captain Xeris, I know your ship has better medical facilities than ours. Would you be willing to take the non-human prisoners? Our environment might be a bit intense for them. The Xylaxian captain's crystalline form hummed with agreement. Of course. Our medical bay is already preparing to receive multiple species, though I admit, we are curious how your teams will manage the evacuation through such hostile conditions. The answer came in the form of more modified mining equipment. The human teams had adapted their cargo handling systems into emergency transport pods, each one capable of maintaining different environmental conditions for their rescued passengers. Industrial equipment is basically just specialized life support systems anyway, Sarah explained as they watched the evacuation unfold. Add some environmental seals, adjust the atmospheric processors, and you've got yourself a multi-species rescue vehicle. The pirates, caught between failing systems and an enemy that thrived in conditions they considered lethal, began surrendering in groups. Their sophisticated weapons and shields proved useless against opponents who had turned the very environment into a weapon. As the last of the rescued prisoners were transferred to the appropriate ships, Vera couldn't contain her scientific curiosity any longer. Captain Chin, your species' ability to adapt and repurpose technology is remarkable, but what truly fascinates me is your casual acceptance of conditions that should be lethal. How did you develop such resilience? Sarah's response was thoughtful. Earth shaped us to be this way. We evolved on a planet that constantly tried to kill us. Extreme temperatures, natural disasters, predators, you name it. We survived not just because we were tough, but because we learned to turn problems into solutions. Those mining tools that became rescue pods. That's just humanity doing what it does best. Taking something dangerous and making it useful. The liberation of the pirate station took less than 2 hours, a time frame that the Xylaxian crew found difficult to believe given the extreme conditions. As they began processing the rescued prisoners and detained pirates, Captain Xeris opened a private channel to Sarah. Your methods are unorthodox, the crystalline being observed, but undeniably effective. Though I must ask, what do you plan to do with the station? Well, Sarah replied, and even through the comm system, her tone carried a hint of mischief. We were thinking of converting it into a joint human-Xylaxian research station. After all, we're better to study extreme environments than in the middle of one. Assuming you're interested in a more permanent collaboration, of course. The idea of turning a pirate stronghold into a scientific outpost was so perfectly human that Captain Xeris couldn't help but agree. As the Harmony's crew began discussing the possibilities, they realized that their initial fear of these Deathworlders had been transformed into something else entirely: respect, curiosity, and perhaps even hope for what such an alliance could achieve. The rescued human crew members, meanwhile, were already suggesting improvements to the station's structure, apparently unfazed by their ordeal. The acid flows could be redirected to power generation. One of them was explaining to an astonished Xylaxian engineer. And those radiation pockets, perfect for materials testing. As they prepared to escort the captured pirates to proper authorities, Sarah made one final observation that seemed to sum up humanity's unique perspective. You know what they say on Earth: when life gives you a caustic nebula, make it work for you. Understanding the Deathworlders. The weeks following the rescue operation brought unprecedented changes to the caustic veil. The former pirate station, now dubbed Convergence Point by its human inhabitants, was rapidly being transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before. A joint research facility where humans and aliens worked together to study extreme environments. Vera stood at her new research station, her translucent form rippling with excitement as she watched a human maintenance team working outside the station's hull. Without the sophisticated environmental shields used by other species, the humans relied on their heavy-duty suits and innate resilience to perform repairs directly in the nebula's caustic atmosphere. "They're modifying the hull plating again," she noted to Captain Zeris, who had remained to oversee the station's conversion, "using the nebula's corrosive properties to create some kind of self-repairing matrix. It's completely counterintuitive, yet entirely typical of human innovation." Zeris completed, their crystalline form refracting the strange light of the nebula. "They don't simply survive hostile environments, they reshape them to their advantage." Sarah Chen entered the observation deck, her environmental suit marked with fresh scarring from the nebula's touch. "The outer modifications are coming along nicely," she reported, removing her helmet. "We've managed to adapt some of our asteroid mining techniques to harvest energy directly from the surrounding particle storms." "Your species continues to surprise us," Zeris observed. "When we first encountered the Stone Crusher, many of us believed humans must be some kind of warrior race, evolved purely for combat and survival. But now you're seeing the whole picture." Sarah smiled. "Yes, we evolved on a death world. Yes, we can survive conditions that would kill most species, but that's not what defines us. It's what we choose to do with those capabilities that matters." Vera's instruments picked up unusual readings from a nearby laboratory. "Speaking of survival capabilities, your science team is conducting experiments in an environment with radiation levels that should be lethal. How do you manage it?" "Adaptability, mostly," Sarah explained, walking over to examine the readings. "Earth exposed us to everything from cosmic rays to background radiation. Our cells develop repair mechanisms, redundant systems. We're not immune to radiation, but we can handle a lot more than most species before it becomes a problem." The conversation was interrupted by Maya's arrival, carrying what appeared to be a steaming container. Several nearby Zelaxian crew members moved back instinctively, their sensors detecting the volatile compounds humans called coffee. "Thought you might need this." Maya offered the container to Sarah. "We've just finished installing the new thermal exchangers. The nebula's energy output is even higher than we predicted. Could be a great power source once we figure out how to harness it properly." Vera's scientific curiosity overcame her caution. "Your people have been here for less than a month, yet you're already talking about harnessing the nebula itself. How do you maintain such optimism in the face of lethal conditions?" Sarah took a sip of her coffee, considering the question. "I think it goes back to our origins. On Earth, early humans faced predators that were faster, stronger, and better armed than we were. We faced natural disasters that could wipe out entire communities. We lived in environments that ranged from frozen wastelands to scorching deserts." She gestured to the swirling chaos of the nebula visible through the observation window. "But in each case, we didn't just survive. We learned. Those predators. We studied them, learned to use tools, became smarter hunters. Natural disasters. We developed warning systems, built stronger shelters. Hostile environments. We adapted them into places we could live and thrive. Rather than simply accepting limitations, you actively work to overcome them," Zeris observed. "It's an approach that many species would consider reckless, yet you've made it work remarkably well." Maya grinned. "Sometimes the best way to deal with a problem is to run straight at it. Speaking of which, The research team has a new theory about using the nebula's caustic properties to improve our ship hull designs. Want to hear something crazy? The next hour was spent discussing theories that most species would consider impossible, yet the humans approached them with characteristic enthusiasm. They talked about using the nebula's corrosive elements to create new alloys, harnessing its radiation for power generation, even finding ways to navigate using the very interference that made conventional sensors useless. You know what I'd noticed? Vera said suddenly. Her appendages moving in what Sarah had learned was a gesture of revelation. When most species encounter something dangerous, their first instinct is to avoid it or defend against it. Humans look at the same thing and ask, how can we use this? Sarah nodded. It's not just about survival. It's about understanding. Everything in nature exists for a reason. Something that's deadly in one context might be incredibly useful in another. You just have to be willing to look past the danger and see the potential. A philosophy that extends beyond mere physical adaptation. Cyrus noted. You apply this principle to technology, to social interactions, even to interspecies cooperation. Exactly, Sarah agreed. Take this station, for example. Most species would see the caustic veil as a barrier, a place to avoid. We see it as an opportunity. A natural laboratory where we can study extreme conditions, develop new technologies, and learn from each other. As if to emphasize her point, alarms began sounding from one of the research labs. Instead of panic, the human and Zalaxian crews moved with practiced coordination, another sign of how quickly they'd learned to work together. Containment breach in Lab 7, Maya reported, checking her displays. The nebula's radiation caused an unexpected reaction in the test materials. Unexpected reactions are just discoveries we haven't understood yet, Sarah replied with characteristic human optimism. Let's go see what we can learn from this one.